Hello. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to this IBM integration webcast, talking all about managing and sharing events at scale across your enterprise. Just a quick introduction. My name is Alan Chatt. I'm a product manager, part of the integration product management team, and I specifically look after our event integration portfolio. And I'm based out of the UK in our Hursley labs, and hopefully some or many of you will be able to come visit us at some point as the world starts to open up again. Right. So in this webcast, I plan to talk about a feature that we've introduced into our integration portfolio called Event Endpoint Management. But I'd like to start by just kind of putting this start by setting a little bit of context as to like why event driven, why now, like what is it that we see people trying to achieve and how we think we can help on that journey. And then I'll dive into like specifically what it means to manage events and how this can help in an event driven journey. So to start that, I'd like to kind of think about how we are looking to help our customers on their event-driven journey with what we're doing in the event integration portfolio. And this is kind of best summed up with the mission statement that I've got on the left-hand side here. And it's to be that catalyst for this transition that we see people looking to go through to become a more real-time company, have a more like real-time operating model, like business model. In essence, fundamentally change the speed at which they're doing business. Now, in order to do that, we believe that we need to help people liberate events, connect to events from all of their various kind of existing systems and that they have or are building in the future. The key to making this scalable is going to be like helping you do discovery and manage reuse of those events that you are connecting to. And that central bit is really the focus of what I'm talking about here today. And then finally, help you put those events to work across all of your company. And this isn't just about kind of how we're going to use event-driven architecture in the way that we're building application. Actually, real-time events have far-reaching consequences, or can have far-reaching consequences and impacts across all aspects of your company. So yes, it can help you build more engaging digital experiences by having really responsive and reactive applications. It can give you much more real-time visibility of your kind of business operations and your business processes, being able to kind of bring this real-time data together and kind of like look at that in real time. I mean, you think about the possibilities of like making a change to your business process and being able to kind of watch the impact of that like pretty much in real time. That's hugely powerful. Workflow automation, like with a huge focus on hyper automation at the moment. What triggers those automations? What do you want to use to trigger those automations? Well, it's things that are happening. They're inherently events. Simple triggers like this happens, then do this other stuff are relatively straightforward. But like events can give rise to detecting like huge numbers of situations that you can derive from sequences of events and what have you. Real-time analytics being like that natural evolution from kind of like batch, maybe quarterly to monthly like analytics to actually looking for trends and patterns that you can respond to in real time. But ultimately, all of this, in order to really change the speed of business, this is all about kind of like automating the response to that. And it's kind of completing that feedback loop as we see it, like going from seeing a situation, deciding what to do about it, taking action, and then observing the response. This events are really helping people tighten that feedback loop. And that's what I mean by when I say kind of improving the speed of business that we're doing business. Just by way of a kind of couple of use cases, what do I mean by like what events can help you to do? So like the first one, again, these are entirely fictitious in terms of, but they're really here to kind of illustrate a point. One is around engaging with customers, and what I like about this one is it really kind of talks to an ecosystem of maybe like if you think about uh, knowing that a user is looking for flights to a particular area, let's say kind of Boston, as well as separately looking at like hiring cars, like in Boston. Well, maybe there's an opportunity for an airline and a car rental company who have partnered to identify that situation in real time, and at that moment put together a package between them that is a combination of flights and the car that their joint customer is interested in, to try and to kind of present that offer to him, maybe as a kind of push notification through the mobile app that really like picks the right time to engage with the right offer in the right context. So these kind of situations become possible as you are become aware of what is happening in your organization at real time. Another example is around kind of predicting customer churn. Let's say you're like a banking customer. Some of the things that like indicate that a customer is looking to change banking provider could be things like frequent or recent high value transactions leaving their account. Could be setting up a payee on their account in their own name, and things like visiting and browsing the closing account page, thing like combinations of things like that. So before they've made contact with you to kind of initiate this process, spotting and preempting, predicting that this might happen, spotting the signs in the real time data that you kind of are constantly monitoring, can help you like be proactive about these situations and try and instigate some proactive measures to try and like retain customers that you think are potentially at risk of leaving. And actually, as we think about like how real-time analytics might play into this, actually having identified a set of situations that you're like already responding to or looking to respond to, you can like train machine learning models and have that look at data to maybe spot other predictive indicators that you hadn't necessarily thought about that are also correlated with people looking to churn or leave you. And again, this can like further enhance the predictability of those situations, so that you're like all of this time you're looking to kind of preempt the situations and take proactive action. So these are just a kind of couple of use cases, but really when I talk about adopting real-time operating, like becoming a more real-time business, it's not about any one of these, because actually some of the like elements of this you'll recognize as like companies have already implemented. It's being able to do like this and many other things like all at once at scale within your company. So these kind of like initiatives and projects stop becoming like large scale development investments. They become like ideas that you can have and implement and try, just based on the data and tools that you already have available to you. So, and actually, as we think about future webcasts that we might do in this kind of vein around like event-driven and an event-driven journey, be really interested in how these use cases maybe resonate with people that are listening in. So. You'll see a survey just launching. I'd be very interested to hear from you as to like how these use cases resonate with your particular journey around event driven, just to help kind of guide what topics we might cover in the future. Now, what is it? What's actually the way that we can help companies become more event driven and make event driven solutions more pervasive and accessible throughout our company? Well, for us, this breaks down into three main key architectural elements. You have like an event distribution layer. Like essentially, you at its core, you need to be able to get events from wherever they are originating to wherever they need to be processed, they need to be acted on, and essentially, you need a set of kind of technologies that can help you to do this. There are many kind of technologies out there, but I think it is fair to say that Apache Kafka as a set of tooling has pretty much become a de facto standard for doing this. And within the integration portfolio, we kind of have event streams. The Once you have an event distribution layer, this means that you can actually kind of move the data around and get the data to where it's needed. The next challenge that you face is essentially like, well, how do I discover what data is available to which like real-time events that I can actually work with that are available to me that I can make use of? And maybe to begin with, as you start your journey, like the set of every single set of events that you might need, you need to go and create kind of integrations for, because they don't yet exist on an event distribution layer. But over time, what you want to make sure is that any events that you are liberating for your first project, that you can, if you need them in projects number 2, 3, 4, further down the line, that you can reuse them. That's the whole nature of like the PubSub, what PubSub gives you. It's the ability to kind of reuse those same events for multiple purposes. And in order to do that, you need some way of helping you discover that they're there, and then you need a way of managing that reuse. And then finally, as we think about like events in general and the uses that we're going to put them to, one of the things that we're thinking about is tools that help you turn those events into kind of action, insight, and basically accelerate your use of that working with that real-time event data. And this is like the third key architectural element to like an event-driven journey. On this webcast today, I want to kind of really hone in on that discovery and management piece, because a lot of people that we are working with, they've kind of started with an event distribution layer. They maybe have got like 1 or 2 projects under their belt, and they're kind of starting on this journey to adopt more event-driven type applications and application styles in what they're doing. And they're starting to run into that kind of problem of scaling, or more specifically, they're looking to ensure that the next 6 projects that they do cost them less, take less effort to implement than the previous 6. And a key to doing that is going to be like having discovery and management, so they can discover the events they've already liberated, and they can kind of start reusing them. And this is kind of what I want to drill into at the moment. Now, the way that we're looking at approaching tackling this discovery and management problem is not to kind of start from the ground up and start from scratch. It's actually to borrow all of the tools, practices, and workflows from what we're already used to as an industry in terms of API management. And so, by way of explaining the kind of synergies that we see between APIs and events, I've just put this kind of like simple explanation together. If we think about the ways that like applications or systems might need to interact within our company, there's kind of 3 main classes of interaction. You might be requesting an action, like you're basically asking another system to do something for you or on your behalf. So that might be place an order, create a new customer account, customer record, create a new lead, make a payment. All of these are examples of requesting an action. And this is where the kind of activities that we are used to serving with APIs in various forms, where you have an API, you describe the API, and anyone can come along and invoke that API, discover it in a portal, and invoke that API to request that action. The second class of ways that systems might need to interact is I've described here as requesting state. Basically, you want some piece of information back. Again, examples of this might be, where is my order? What is my account balance? Where does this customer live? What's their contact details? Or all of the things like that. In all of these instances, it's like there's something specific that I'm looking to do or find out, and there are a couple of ways that I could implement this. The first and most obvious one that we've been using for a while is, again, to surface an API. It's maybe something like REST or Graph or something like that, where we describe it. Someone can invoke it with a set of like query parameters that say what they're looking for, and back comes a response with the result. And this has served us well for a while, but there's a certain class of problem that are resulting in us looking at an alternative way at addressing this, and that's what I've illustrated below in the request state section, where instead of having an API that people have to invoke when they want information, we instead proactively push the data that they're looking for to them. And so the typical pattern here is to create change data capture on the database, publish the changes to a topic, and then applications can then subscribe to those change events. And they essentially use those change events to rebuild their own local view of the data. Think of it as a local cache that is constantly kept up to date by any changes that occur being kind of replayed and applied to their own local cache. What this means is, rather than having to invoke an API and having like network latency and kind of hops in there, as well as placing additional load on the backend system, an application like looking to query the data can just look at its own local cache, its own local database, be it a Mongo or MySQL or Postgres or wherever it's stored, even in memory, and it runs the query locally. And that results in very low latency access to data because it's kept very local to them. So in situations where latency is a requirement, where high volumes of queries are like the nature of the workload, this is where this kind of event-driven pattern is becoming very prevalent. And the final form of interaction is around notification. This is like, tell me when something happens because I'm going to do something because of that. But rather than like me keep asking, I'm just going to sit here and wait for you to tell me when it happens. So this might be like, tell me whenever an order is placed so that I can send a confirmation email, or tell me when an order is delivered so that I can kind of send that notification text or what have you, or tell me when my customer is phoning up and leaving so that I can actually make contact with them and do something about it. So the reason for kind of explaining these different types of interaction is we already do API management, like for APIs that act as an interface to systems, and we're very familiar with like how we scale this kind of programmatic access across our company. So it stands to right that the topics, like that pub sub interaction, that event-based interaction that exists in the bottom half of this diagram, well, topics are just another form of interface to a remote system that I'm going to subscribe to for a variety of reasons. So it stands to right that we'll want to apply the same kind of description, discovery, management, and controls to topics that we're already used to applying to APIs. Now, in the same way that we don't manage every single API that exists, we typically manage APIs at what I would describe as an application boundary, or maybe even an enterprise boundary. But it's at a boundary that we manage APIs. So any APIs that we're using within our kind of like maybe microservice application or within that application boundary, they tend to be not managed with an API management solution. If we've got any management at all, it's kind of built into whatever framework that we're using, be it kind of Istio or Service Mesh or things like that. So when I'm talking about like API management and managing events, it's at that application boundary, as we're deliberately surfacing something for people beyond our direct sphere of like team or control, something for them, a well-defined interface that they can rely on and use to interact with whatever system it is that I own. So this is, again, the pretty much the architectural principle that most people adopt around using APIs for integration, and it's the exact same one that we would advocate for around the events. Like, there will be events that exist within your application, and it's part of how you wired your application together. And there will be events that you want to expose beyond your application as a way for other people to kind of understand more about what's going on in your application or subscribe to things that's going on in your application. So that's the domain of where we see this being really important and really critical. And when you think about it, like this is how we're going to scale the use of events and the pervasiveness of real-time events across our company by in the same way that we formalize the way that we kind of describe, catalog, manage APIs, doing the same for events. It's having that kind of control point is and like formal interface definition is the only thing that we is the way that we can actually like scale this across a company of like hundreds or thousands of interested parties. So let's come on to what we've actually built with event endpoint management and how this helps tackle some of the problems that I've outlined. So first off, I'll say what I'm about to do is describe what we've done with event endpoint management, how we've built it, some of the challenges that we're tackling, and like what is the actual kind of key components that form an event endpoint management solution. We'll be sharing this recording and the slides on the community afterwards, so please don't worry about kind of furiously scribbling down this link. But in terms of, we don't have time for a live demo in this session. But in terms of actually like a really neat recording, you'll be able to see like everything that I've talked about in action on a recording that's on this blog post here. So please, I would encourage everyone that's watching this to go and have a look at what we've done, because it really helps you kind of get a picture of how this works and quite where the synergies are between kind of APIs and events. But let's start with how we help you describe your events. So this is the first part in making things discoverable is, well, let's actually describe what they are. And with event endpoint management, what we do is we help you build an async API description. So anyone familiar with API management is probably familiar with OpenAPI as a standardized way of describing like REST-based APIs and synchronous APIs. You can think of async API as the sister project to OpenAPI. It shares, deliberately so, a lot of the same concepts and constructs and terminology, but obviously it has some additional things like protocols and operations that are specific to an asynchronous domain that it needs to cater for and support. So it's the perfect sister project in many ways to like the OpenAPI specification. This is relatively speaking, like in its infancy compared to OpenAPI. So while it borrows an awful lot of concepts, at the same time, it continues to evolve at a pace as the community around it grows and the set of tools and use cases that it can address continues to expand. So for example, like we are active members of this community, and you'll see a bunch of contributions that we've made, including like the MQ bindings for this, as well as some kind of tooling in the async API project. I would encourage everyone to go and have a look at this. It's a very friendly community, and like there's a huge growth and interest there. The point about describing event endpoints, though, is that it goes beyond just, well, what is the format of the events? Like you've got to include so much more information to actually make that description useful. So you've got to include things like, well, where do those events actually exist? What's the name of the topic? What's the name of the brokers? Like, what's the address of the brokers? What's the how do I connect to them? What's the protocol it's available over? That's like at a minimum all of the technical information, or some of the technical information that you would need to understand in order to like make use of the events. In addition to that, you'll also likely want other information, kind of meta information about it, like, okay, that's the schema, but what does that actually mean? Where do these events come from? Maybe who owns these events? Like, who is ultimately responsible for the systems where that's emitting these events, so I can like understand who to contact about them. Async API provides you a way of bringing all of that information together in one neat description language that you can use to render human readable forms, but also kind of feeding to tooling to do things like code generation and such and so forth. It's a hugely important and interesting step in terms of making events discoverable. Which then leads me neatly on to the second D of my wheel around discoverability. Or how are we helping you make events that exist that you've described using async API discoverable? Again, borrowing from API management, there is the idea of a developer portal. This is a single place where you can go that is searchable, allows you to kind of structure the events so that you can put them into products and categories and catalogs and what have you, and basically provides people a place where they can go to actually browse and discover these events. In actual fact, as part of Cloud for integration, this is where we bring the management of APIs and events together. So you can have a single place where you are both like defining your endpoints across synchronous and asynchronous, and a single portal where you are making those discoverable. So, and that's a really powerful thought, that there is one place to go to find all programmatic interfaces that you might want to that you as a developer or you as a kind of end user might want to make use of. You see synchronous and asynchronous interfaces alongside each other, and rather than having like separate places that you need to go and search and what have you, you see them together in the same context, and you get to the chance to pick the right way of interacting with that system that fits your use case. So that is a really kind of powerful concept there. The other thing that we enable you to enable through that portal is self-service access to those events. In the same way that as an API user, you would expect to go to the portal, find the API that you want, be able to generate some credentials and start using it straight away. The same thing is what we enable for events. But you can only safely enable that if you put that self-service, if you put in place some the ability to have guardrails, policies that you apply to those events that control, well, who is able to access what, under what conditions. And the kinds of things that you can do here is like, maybe there's certain sets of data that is relatively should be relatively pervasive and free to access within your organization. So these can have a completely automated self-sign-up flow where you click a button, generate credentials, and can start using it straight away. But in addition to that, maybe there's also a set of event data that has embedded within it kind of SPI data, things that you need to check what use people want to put the data to that's in those events before you like grant them access to it. So you might actually choose to enable a kind of manual approval step as part of someone requesting access to those events. Again, this is all of these kind of guardrails and these types of policies and the enforcement of is what we help you enable. So you can have a simple set of policies, and you can apply them across like both APIs and events that you're kind of managing here. The kind of other part to it, once you enable people to self-sign up, is then, well, all right, maybe they can like self-sign up to it, but I still want to know who actually ultimately has access to what, so that if needs be, I can report on the use, track the use, and if I need to, revoke access should that become something that's important to do at some point in the future. So that's all part of this process. In the same way that you can revoke access to APIs, you should be able to revoke access to events. And then finally, I've very much gone like overboard with the alliteration. So I'm stretching kind of what decoupled means in this instance. But essentially, what I mean here is, well, how can we prevent inadvertent or malicious kind of interference between different subscribers? So, for example, for those familiar with the Kafka protocol and Kafka consumption mechanisms, you wouldn't want two different subscribers using the same consumer group ID, because then they would interfere with each other's consumption. So we provide, not only do we provide enforcement of policies, but we can help enforce that kind of segregation and decoupling between subscribers to, again, make it safe to share events and scale the use of events across your enterprise. The other thing that really fits under this heading is also like the ability to version interfaces. Again, you can already version schemas, but maybe when you're versioning an interface, you're actually kind of creating a new topic with like an incompatible data structure that kind of supersedes what you had before, like a version 2 of the topic, if you will. Again, like having a management plane that can help you manage that transition. Maybe start by having both deprecate one, notify all the users to move across, and help you manage those kind of transitions. Very important as you start to think about reuse, how events are going to get reused at scale across your company. Right, so that was a lot of talk about like what we help you achieve. Well, how do we actually help you achieve that? And so I kind of want to talk through the main components that we deploy and employ to enable this, enable you to do this at scale and safely. So I want to do it in the context, like describe how these things are interacted with, like in a kind of time-based fashion. And as we go through, I'm going to draw the analogies out to how it is similar to the workflows around API management as well. So let's start off in the situation where there exists a Kafka cluster that has some events on it that are used within an application, and that application team believe or know that those events are going to be, or some of those events are going to be useful to other teams within the organization. Maybe like some of those events represent every time new customer leads are kind of registered. So those events are obviously going to be like more broadly useful. So they want to like advertise that to the broader organization so other people can make use of that. So they first start by defining it as an interface to the API manager in the same way that you would have done with a REST API. API manager helps you build that async API description. The second step is that API manager pushes that description to 2 different places. The first place is the developer portal. This is the portal that we spoke about. That is the place that other teams, anyone within your company can come along, discover and search for the events that have been shared or are potentially available to them. The second place it pushes that description to is an events gateway, and I'll come on to like exactly what that events gateway component is doing. But you can probably already guess by the name that it's architecturally it's performing a similar role to an API gateway. So the next step in the journey is for like the developer who's like in another team, say, to go and browse that developer portal. And what they'll do is they'll look at the developer portal, they will find the event interface that they're looking for, and they will start using, like generate the credentials that they need. And the description will contain everything that they need in order to start using that and subscribe to that set of events. They then build their application. Now, this is where the kind of enforcement becomes important. So that developer builds their application as if they're just connecting to a Kafka cluster. As far as they're concerned, that's what they're connecting to because they're consuming over the Kafka protocol. So they use all of the standard Kafka libraries and docs, and they're connecting to it with the credentials they've been given through the portal, and they're consuming it and working with the data they get in the way as if they were writing any other kind of application connecting to Apache Kafka. What's actually happening is their connection credentials are causing their connection to go via the events, this events gateway component. And this is a component of the event endpoint management solution. And what it can do is it understands the Kafka protocol. It transparently intercepts it, and it enforces all of the any policies that you've specified and validates credentials and enforces that kind of separation that I spoke about before. And it does all of this transparently. And once everything's okay, the connection is then kind of passed on to like the actual Kafka cluster where they reside. So in the same way that an API gateway will kind of front APIs and do all of the enforcement, identity checking, and validation before kind of forwarding the actual kind of API call onto the API implementation, the events gateway here is performing the exact same role in the asynchronous scenario that we've talked through here. And this collection of kind of capabilities is what comes together as event endpoint management. Now, there's a few kind of additional advantages actually that I just kind of want to mention at this point about like what this management layer kind of gives you over and above, let's say, using like RBAC on the actual kind of Kafka cluster itself, or things like that. So I'll start by kind of highlighting one of the key things that a number of people have kind of spoken to us about in relation to this kind of solution, and that's where actually you're not talking about an environment, or typically not talking about an environment where it's just a single Kafka cluster across an enterprise, especially when you start with kind of wide scale adoption of event driven architectures. You'll have lots of different deployments of Kafka. Some of them will be the same. Some of them will be open source. Some of them will be kind of commercially supported distributions of Kafka, like event streams or what have you. Some of them will even be like instances of managed cloud services on like Amazon or AWS or Azure, like either natively on those services or provided by kind of third party in those cloud environments. It's very, very possible, maybe even highly likely, that you'll have a heterogeneous environment with different types of Kafka managed by different groups. And even if you kind of centralize the provision of a lot of it, like almost inevitably there is a kind of heterogeneity to that environment. By having adopting the same approach as we have around API management to managing events, it gives you the ability to have a common management plane that can sit above a broadly heterogeneous like event distribution layer. So what that means is that it's totally fine to have like different flavors of Kafka managed by different people, because you can bring this commonality to it with that common management layer, common way of describing interfaces that you're sharing, common ways of kind of cataloging those in the portal, and common ways of enforcing policies. So that's kind of the first advantage. The second kind of key advantage is that actually like you're separating out the administration of the policies, those kind of inter-system policies, and providing a common place at which you can enforce policies, enforce like reuse of those events, and gives you visibility into that. And when you view events as maybe like tiny packets of data, suddenly it becomes like increasingly obvious why you want that like slightly more centralized view as to like how those like tiny packets of data and state are used throughout your company, because a lot of that data, especially when it's like SPI, is subject to regulations, and you need to have that visibility. So it's all part of controlling the reuse and actually make it safe and scalable to kind of make these real-time events available across your enterprise. So those are kind of like some of the key advantages that our customers are looking to gain from putting in place this kind of management solution to help them scale out. So that was a lot of kind of information that we've been through, and I want to kind of leave you with a few key like additional reading points that you can like go and look into and see, read a bit more about like why we're doing this, what kind of technologies that we're using, and really see what we've done, because I think it's really, really important. So first off, just another link back to that demo. Again, we've broken the demo down into into those three stages of the journey. It's the describing and making a stream of events available as number one. Uh, oh, well, actually, no. Even before that, it's the deploying and configuring of the kind of event endpoint management. Then it's the describing events, and then finally it's the, well, what's the developer experience for coming along and discovering and consuming those events. So those three stages of the journey are kind of separately kind of cataloged in that demo experience. It's really good. It gives you a really good feeling for how this actually works and where the synergies are with what you're probably already doing today with API management. For those who are unfamiliar with Async API, we've got a Kafka developer's guide to Async API. This really helps kind of ground what the Async API community is doing in the context of someone that's maybe more familiar with Apache Kafka as a technology. Again, really interesting kind of viewpoint there. We tried to kind of summarize what is event endpoint management, like actually give you a succinct description of that, like covering in a bit more detail some of the features that are available and how that works. And then finally, well, why should you manage events? Like, what is the point of doing this? It's not just like a management layer for management's sake. Like, what are the benefits? And this is really kind of reiterating some of those points that I was making at the front, which is, in order to scale the use of events across an enterprise, where the goal is to make all aspects of our business more real time, more responsive, then we need to start finding ways of where we can make the cost of the next set of projects that we do less expensive than the projects that we're like currently, those first couple of projects that we're embarking on at the moment. So yeah, that's another kind of really interesting read. So that concludes the material that I was looking to take us through. I hope you found that useful in terms of how first off, like, why event endpoint management is really important, and what it can help you achieve in terms of like those business objectives of becoming more real time. And then like talking through like what are the key elements, what are the key things that you need to think about as you're managing those events, and how event endpoint management helps you solve that, like using the same workflows you're used to with APIs. And in fact, if you're using this as part of Cloud Pak for integration, you can manage events and APIs in exactly the same way, in exactly the same set of tooling, with the same policies and same portal that you're using for both. So I'm just going to have a quick look at, see whether any of the questions that we've had come through are something that I want to answer. So I'm just looking at one that I don't think Matt Chergwin, who's one of our lead developers on event endpoint management, has kindly been helping me ask or answer some of them. So there's one here that's just come in that hasn't been answered yet. Do you have a sequence diagram to describe the message journey? So I think there's two ways that I could potentially interpret that question. Like one is around like a maturity, like a journey towards becoming more event driven, and one is a more kind of I guess a technical interpretation around kind of like lineage of the events. In terms of a journey to becoming more event driven, I would say that a lot of people that we work with are starting down the path of what they're looking for from events is to get more real-time like visibility of the data, like spread the data around, make the like almost like push changes to data out to additional applications. And this is where they tend to start. That's almost like a show me kind of question. Show me what this is, or tell me like what the current state of affairs is. The next step of maturity is around detecting specific like changes that you're interested in, because obviously a heck of a lot changes every moment within an organization, and so you need some like tooling to help you kind of drill into like specifically what changes am I interested. It might be I'm only interested in high value customers, or I'm only interested when my like a certain like demographic shows a higher propensity to churn than others. And then finally, like to really kind of complete that loop, it tends to be around like more automating responses to like specific situations. And again, as like being able to go from what is happening in real time to an automated response, that's about as fast as we can get, because at that point there's no human in the loop to slow down the response. And that's almost like the pinnacle of like what a real-time business can do. And imagine that you had that ability across all aspects of your company. It would be like hugely beneficial. In terms of the journey for an event, in terms of like a more kind of technical interpretation of that question, it would be what we can easily show you in event endpoint management today is like a list of all your events, and we can like show you who are the consumers of those events, like what are they consuming, and also like what are the applications, what use have they said that they're going to put that data to. One of the interesting directions that we isn't part of the product yet, but we have talked to a number of people about, is how that might intersect with a more broader like data governance type of initiative, where actually you don't just want to look at like the events piece, but you want to look at like the end to end, like where has the data come from, which database, which applications are using it. So I think that's an interesting integration that we can look at. We have all of the information you need for the like to get that events visibility portion, and how we might kind of surface that and make that available to kind of like data governance projects like Apache Atlas or Jira or technologies like that, to help you kind of view that as part of your overarching governance approach to governance. I think is also really interesting. There's another question that I've just seen come in, that is in IBM Cloud Pak for Integration, is the Events Gateway part of the native product offering? If it is, which component is it? So just to explain a little bit about like where Event Endpoint Management fits, it sits as it's only available through Cloud Pak for Integration. So the Event Gateway component itself is only available under a Cloud Pak for Integration license. So if you have a Cloud Pak for Integration license, then you get access to not only the entire integration portfolio, but part of that is the events component, event endpoint management, which is what I've spoken about, and the event gateway itself. But it's very much part of the event endpoint management, which is available under a CP4I license. One last question that's come in. I think we've got time for one more, certainly. What actions provider and consumer need to do to trigger or handle an event? So, okay, what does a consumer actually need to do to kind of handle an event? I'm going to go back to kind of this diagram to answer it from a kind of producer or consumer side. So let's start with the producer side, actually. So from a producer side, actually, to produce an event that you make available to like your broader organization, you literally, the application behaves as if it was just any application. It just produces data to a kind of Kafka topic. There's nothing special that you need to do in the application itself. It's just a standard application there. The job of actually kind of then advertising that or surfacing that topic to the broader organization is done via the person on the right in this diagram, labeled as the API developer, who like goes to the API manager and actually is actually kind of creating that definition in there. He's like he or she is probably using the Kafka topic by way of providing at least half of that information to help generate that async API description. So the actual kind of application itself the producer application doesn't do anything special. And as soon as that definition is in the API manager, like it's pushed out to the event gateway and the developer portal. It's advertised to the organization as a whole. From a consumer side, again, there was two parts to the journey. There was the developer actually discovering it. Well, that's them visiting the developer portal, which is just a hosted web page that contains a list of all of the shared topics that they might potentially have access to. From that developer portal, they would have the ability to generate some credentials. And that is, again, that's a kind of activity where like there's a button in there that allows them to define what their application is going to do. And then assuming it's, just make the assumption it's an automated flow, those credentials are then kind of made, like literally on the screen, made available for them to copy and paste into their application. In terms of what their application has to do, again, one of the beauties of what we've done here is it doesn't have to use a special library. It's coded and built just as if it's talking directly to the Apache Kafka cluster itself. So it doesn't need to use a special client library. It can be written in any language using standard Kafka client libraries that are available in that language, using the credentials that it's been provided. The event gateway itself is transparently intercepting at the protocol layer, which means that it doesn't matter kind of where the Kafka cluster is. It can intercept the kind of connection, do any of the enforcement that it needs to before kind of passing it along. So that is that was a kind of in-depth way of providing what is a simple answer, is that from a producer and consumer side, there's nothing special that you need to do in order to kind of make use of this system beyond just writing standard applications that talk Kafka. It's that's what's really nice about working in this way. And it's the same thing that applies to APIs, in the sense that, like a managed API, you don't interact with it any differently than if it was a kind of regular API that you just kind of created for internal use in your application. All of the management is applied transparently at a gateway, and that's the exact same thing here. Right. Well, I've seen that the questions coming in have started to slow, so I'm hoping that we've covered everything that you need and what everyone was looking to get from this session. I will say that my contact details were on the title slide, so if anyone is watching the replay or has a question that they have come up afterwards, then please post to us either on the community, or please feel free to contact me directly. I would love to hear from you, both in terms of your thoughts, as well as kind of any additional questions that you might have around event endpoint management, managing events in general, or actually anything in event integration and your EDA journey. That would be great. And with that, I wish you a pleasant day, and look forward to our next event integration session soon. Thank you.